G'day folks, my name is Rob. Welcome back to another F1 fantasy video. Today I want to take a look at some of the price reveals that F1 have just announced in the F1 fantasy game, which is due to launch tomorrow, Monday the 27th of February, and some initial reactions to the handful of drivers that we could hazard a guess or already know what their prices are. If you like what you see, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm hoping to push out a couple more videos before the first race next weekend. But let's get straight into it. So yesterday, Formula One tweeted a very cryptic tweet announcing, or not announcing, but providing this excerpt of the different drivers and their assigned prices for the upcoming season. There was some speculation, albeit not confirmed by F1, that they were going to wait for preseason testing to decide the prices. I think that's very much the case now. And given that the pricing from what F1 has said will be compressed to accommodate an additional constructor in our teams this season, we've seen a number of drivers priced down from what they were at the end of last season. So we're going to take a look at the ones that we know or feel confident with guessing now, and I expect there'll be a number of others that either follow later today, or if not, we'll find out when the game launches tomorrow morning UK time. So this is what we've got on the screen here: 6 drivers that F1 announced, and then there was a 7th announcement for Lewis Hamilton, which we'll get into in a minute. So there's 3 I want to take a look at in more detail. The first being Max Verstappen. He comes in off a blistering 2022 F1 fantasy season with the most points across the board of all drivers, averaging just over 40 points per race and dominating his teammate in the process. One of the rules, as many of you may already know this season, that's been introduced is that any driver can be essentially what's called now DRS boosted or turbo driven or captain, whatever you want to call it. There's a 2 times multiplier to whatever score that assigned driver gets in that race. So Max, by far and away the best driver on the grid at the moment. I think he'll no doubt continue and is a deserved favourite for the World Drivers' Championship this season. So I think he's essential to own. If you're getting 40 points per race from Max, I mean, that's exceptional output for your DRS booster. And again, I've touched on this before in other videos, but there isn't really any confirmation yet around the scoring metrics for beating teammates. It's very apparent Max has a stranglehold over Sergio Perez, not really comparable to many, if any, other drivers on the grid. So if there are points assigned for beating teammates this season, Max is banking at least 2, maybe 5 points per race, most races. He comes in this season, according to F1's announcement, at 26.9 million. We're working with a budget from the get-go of 100 million. I think even for just over a quarter of your team's budget, 26.9, 27 million is pretty good value. I'm almost certain I'll be starting with him in my race week 1 team. So just because of kind of what you're getting from a driver of his caliber. So he's one of 2 drivers that are locked into my team for the first race, and then I guess we'll just figure out the other 2 or 3 or 4 assets that I need to factor into my team strategy. The next driver I've got here is Charles Leclerc. He's come in at 21.2, or at least what we think is 21.2. If we go back to this screen here, we've got one of the Ferrari drivers, bottom middle, should I say. That to me looks like Charles Leclerc's haircut, and I think using these as an estimate, it's pretty fair to say that that middle one on the bottom row is Charles Leclerc. We'll get to the others in a minute, but I'm sure if you can't already tell, it's pretty clear to me who those drivers are. So we'll just jump back to Leclerc. He had a very strong season compared to years gone, although Ferrari were disappointing at various points, which has been well documented. He had 667 points last season, averaging just over 30 points per race, and was a turbo driver favourite for many people throughout last season. I think he, at this price, it's 50-50 for me whether I get him into my team or not. Realistically, it's going to be, for me, from the get-go, Verstappen, at least Red Bull constructor. One more driver we'll cover in a moment. And then it's fair game for how I want to construct the rest of my team. So Leclerc is on the edge. I know he's got, overall, even though the stats or beat teammate percentage of 55% doesn't really reflect how much better he is than Carlos Sainz, I think he'll be, a popular choice for many people. He had a very sound preseason testing weekend. Just looking at some of the times he put in, he was fourth fastest on day one, eighth on day two, and fourth on day three. So, you kind of know what you're getting as well from Leclerc. Ferrari's going to have a very strong car this year, I think. Whether or not they're able to match Red Bull is another question, and we'll obviously find that out sooner or later. But I think, for Leclerc and Ferrari are both solid assets to own heading into this season, just because of the compressed pricing and the fact that Verstappen comes in, 5 million more than Leclerc. That's, another 20% of your budget with Leclerc right there. So if I'm going for him and Verstappen, I'm probably taking haircuts on most of my other assets. So that's just something I need to think about. 50-50, as I said, but by no means, a bad asset to own at all. The next driver I want to take a look at is Fernando Alonso. He had a mixed season of results last season with Alpine moves to Aston Martin in a car that many are expecting to make it into the top four in the constructors, which is, if that eventuates, a remarkable achievement by their prior seasons. He had 249 points in 2022 in an Alpine that was plagued with reliability throughout the season. So I think this Aston Martin is going to be a lot more reliable, a lot faster, and we all know what Fernando Alonso is capable. He's had some incredible race and qualifying performances over the years. Even last year, at his age, was he 38, 39, 40? He's by no means one of the young bucks on the grid, but he can still put in a few stellar performances here and there. He averaged 11.32 points per race. Again, that was probably to do with the fact that a number of his races were DNFs. And even though he wasn't able to beat Ocon quite as much as I would have expected, Ocon is obviously no slouch either. He comes up against Lance Stroll for this season, and the latest news is Stroll is likely to miss the first race in Bahrain, so he'll be going up against an untested driver in Felipe Drugovich. I have no doubt in my mind Alonso will wipe the floor with Drugovich as his teammate. And again, if beat teammate points are on offer, he should be picking up quite a few every weekend. He comes in at 8.3 million, according to F1's formal announcement this morning. So they announced Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso, and Lewis Hamilton, and we'll get into Hamilton's price on the next page. But I think at 8.3, that is an absolute steal. He is absolutely in my team for the first race week. I expect he'll be very popular at that price. And with that car, that absolute rocket ship that Aston Martin have designed, he should, assuming he can finish races in and among the points, his price will probably go up quite substantially. So he's probably behind Verstappen and Red Bull constructor, number 3, an almost sure thing to be in my team next weekend, and I wouldn't be surprised if he has one of, if not the highest ownership in the game by the time next week rolls around. So there's 4 other prices that have been revealed, or we can assume have been revealed to us in the last 24 hours. Hamilton, as I touched on, he's been announced at 23.7 million. He's, I guess, because he's kind of on par with Charles Leclerc. They're both, I'd say they'll probably be similar in terms of their final points in the WDC this season. Again, same reasoning for why I'm 50-50 on Leclerc, same for Hamilton, is that, for a quarter of your budget, and most of that will be soaked up by Verstappen and Red Bull, I'm really not sure how he's going to fit into my team at the moment. But again, the reason why I think I'll probably start with just Verstappen and then figure out if I can factor in another one of Leclerc or Hamilton is because if you start with the highest priced driver, at least this is how I approach things, you have a bit more flexibility with downgrading rather than starting at someone like Leclerc at 21 or Hamilton at 23 and having to move up to a Verstappen at 27. So I think having that extra wiggle room to navigate price changes and such with Verstappen is going to be helpful if I decide to pivot away from him. So Hamilton, I think he had sound testing. Mercedes really didn't surprise me too much. I was probably hoping for even a little bit more from them. If we just look at the times here, Hamilton, he was sixth fastest on day one. I don't even. He was 15th on day two, and then second on day three. So a pretty mixed weekend for him. I know Mercedes are trying to tweak a few different things to their setup, so testing isn't necessarily gospel as far as performance and times are concerned, but provides, I think, still a very helpful yardstick for understanding how drivers and the cars perform over those 3 days. So Hamilton, TBC for me, but I do think having Verstappen as my starting premium driver and being able to pivot away to Lewis Hamilton if need be offers that great flexibility. As for George Russell, he comes in at 18.6. I'm personally not convinced I'll start with him in my team. I think 18.6 is a pretty fair price. He was very consistent throughout 2022 in his first season in the Mercedes. So I would probably expect a pretty similar performance this season. Going back to my point on the points around beating teammates, there to me isn't a clear-cut number one driver at Mercedes, so I think that's not going to work in their favor, not just for scoring points in the World Drivers, but also from an F1 fantasy perspective. It will be much harder to understand, who is expected to do better in those races, qualifying performances on Saturday and on the Sunday as well. So Russell, I think, very fairly priced, but he's probably one I will be avoiding for the first race week. Lando Norris, he comes in at 11.2. I had him on my preseason watch list. I think, because he's going up against a rookie teammate in Piastri, and in my opinion is probably still the seventh best driver, the best driver outside of the top six teams / drivers. Alonso, I think, will really rival him this season. So I think back to my point, because he's got a rookie teammate, he should have Piastri's measure, certainly for the first few races while the Australian kind of gets to grips with the car, acclimatizes to its performance. The McLaren, though, wasn't exactly encouraging over these last 3 days in Bahrain. I do think that from what Zach Brown's saying, it will take a few weeks for them, if not longer, to bring the car up to a level of performance that they consider adequate and that they think will be competitive. So it's hard for me to say with any confidence I will get McLaren assets into my team from the outset. If I was to roll with one, it probably would be Lando Norris, but at 11.2, it's a price that I'm kind of unsure about at the moment. I think it's probably fair for what we're getting. I maybe would have expected Alonso's price to be a little higher, to be on par with Lando Norris, but it almost seems to have been too easy of a decision if I'm tossing up between the two, given there's 2-3 million between them, to want to go with Lando Norris when Alonso's much more affordable and expected to be in a much better car. So I will see how the rest of the pricing shakes out when the game goes live tomorrow, but for me, Lando Norris is a wait and see. Pierre Gasly, he moves into an Alpine, a car which hopefully is going to be a bit more competitive than the AlphaTauri he's been accustomed to the last few seasons. He comes in at 8.1 million. Personally, I think he's an avoid for me. As I said, Alonso also kind of at and around that price. He's a clear-cut favourite for me in the team. So Gasly, if we go back to this screen, he, I believe, is the top left. That purple colouring makes me think it's Alpine over any other team on the grid. So Gasly, I think he'll have a much better performance, much better season in 2023. He goes up against Ocon, they have some history, but he's in a much more competitive car. It wasn't exactly the most encouraging weekend from the Alpine's performance, but it's still a cut above where the AlphaTauri was last season. So hopefully we see the Pierre Gasly of old. He is one of my favourite drivers on the grid, but another one that I will probably be avoiding for the very first race week. So look, that was just a quick reaction and initial thoughts on these prices, I think, for the most part, they are pretty fairly priced, but there are only a couple as of right now that I'm absolutely set on having in my team. I want to see how the rest of them shake out tomorrow when the game launches. I'm super excited, and I hope you guys are too. But if you do like the video, be sure to show some love to the channel. I'm hoping, as I said, to push out a couple more videos before the end of the week, before the first race in Bahrain. So stay tuned. I'll have more for you, and I will see you all very, very soon.